Now we're going to get started, get going. This has been a battle. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rich Mellon, and I have two very special guests that this has been a battle to get them on here. Charlie Masheck and Justin Jett from Hoosier Outdoors. Did I get that right?
Yeah, Hoosier Trapper Supply and Hoosier Trapper Outdoors. So, and then the Trap House Podcast. So,
yeah, we had a bunch of names.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. We'll get to all of that.
That's close. And then you're right. It has been a battle, and
technology, man.
Finally we're here.
So. Well, it's so funny because it has become more and more crucial to be able to do stuff over the internet. And when we rely on it, it hasn't been as reliable as what we've dreamt about. You know, before, when it was just a giggle to do it, well, it wasn't that hard. It worked most of the time, I guess, and we didn't really worry about it. But now, where it's so crucial, it has definitely had some shortcomings. And this is the third or fourth different software that I've attempted. So
we got it. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you guys. Charlie, obviously you've been at this longer than Justin.
Yep, I'm a little older. I got to think a second. I think I've been at this for 47 years trapping, as far as trapping. And that's when I started, still in school, obviously, and started Hoosier Trapper Supply, actually my senior year in high school. So that was in 1976 when I graduated. So, yeah, been at it a long time, longer than probably most of your listeners have been born. So,
I graduated in 77. We're pretty close, Charlie.
Okay, we're very close. We're very close then. So, yeah. Okay. I don't know what your demographic is on listeners, but I think generally they're probably younger than we are. So.
I do get a lot of shocked reactions when people they come meet you or they come out on the trap line and you know, you put in that long day and everything and they turn around and afterwards they discover what your actual age is, and it's like they don't believe it, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing that concerns me whatsoever. I like to see more young people doing it. I mean, that's very, very important.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you were referring to that they were surprised to see you being that active and able to stick with it that long. Is that where you were coming from?
Yeah.
Okay. I got a quick story for you. So, 3 years ago, I'm waiting on a gentleman in our shop, and he really wasn't a trapper. He was a deer hunter, but he had some beavers he needed to catch.
Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here, and I bet you're just like me, and the day can't start without that first cup of coffee. For me, it's Stout Maple, Old Smoke Coffee's darkest roast, strong, aromatic, and smooth. That gets me revved up and ready for whatever the day throws at me. Old Smokes roast their coffee over wood fires, the old-fashioned way. Wood roasting takes time, much longer than modern hot air roasting. Slow roasting over wood takes the bitter out of the bean and imparts a heavenly taste and aroma from the wood used. Old Smokes makes a perfect roast for each person. There are 5 roasts from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Right now you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH, that's R-I-C-H, and get a free travel bottle on any purchase of $45 of coffee, excluding the Wounded Warriors blend. Just go to oldsmokescoffee.com, that's O-L-E, smokescoffee.com. Use the promo code RICH. In these trying times, everybody's trying their best to adapt. Old Smokes is changing the promo rewards every couple of weeks, but every time, from now on, use RICH for the code. RICH will be the only promo code going forward, and what the heck, it's a lot less spelling on that silly phone screen. And now, back to today's show.
So, anyways, I'm waiting on this guy, and he, like I said, he wasn't a trapper, but he did some deer hunting, but he had some problem beavers on the place that he deer hunted, and they wanted him caught. And I'm explaining to him, you know, how to do it, and that you probably need to get some hip boots or whatever and get in the water. And he turns to me, he goes, "I'm 56 years old. I can't be doing that." So, anyways,
you're as old as you act.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I'm thinking,
I never think about my age. I truly never think about my age. We were doing a show with a fella, and we were doing Wolverine. We were up very near the Northwest Territories border. We'd put on, I don't know, it would have been about 300 kilometers that day. So I don't know, 180 miles on snowmobiles. And the one guy, mind you, he was in really poor condition, and that doesn't help you at all. But he was talking about how old he felt and all that kind of stuff. And I saw you kids, right? I was teasing because I was pretty sure that I was much older than him. And he says, "Well, what, are you older than me?" And I says, "I'm pretty sure I am." And he looked at me and he says, "How old are you?" And I says, "Well, how old are you?" He says, "Well, I'm 38." I said, "Well, I'm 60." But it's all a state of mind, right?
Yeah, and you got to keep at it. So yeah, it really is, you know. And I don't, other than joking around, I do not think or feel my age at all. So, right, and I don't even know what that's supposed to feel like. But no, I'm not giving into it. Let's put it that way.
No, if I don't think about it, I'm 18 for eternally. It's just my
Yeah.
body every now and then says, nah.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get back to the beginning. You were raised in trapping. Was your dad a trapper, or how did it begin?
I was not. No, just something I was interested in. My grandpa did some nuisance trapping on his farm, and that kind of sparked my interest. And then, you know, it was kind of one of those things that always was in the back of my mind. Watched Daniel Boone on TV as a kid, and thought that was cool. Um, we stopped on a family vacation on the way home. We stopped at a place in Illinois, and it was Ed Bauer's Fur Company, and picked up one of his catalogs, and that was kind of the starting point of me realizing that all this stuff was available to buy, and that was kind of the starting point. I think I was 14 at that time. So, but yeah, I did not have a family that were trappers by any means. So it's kind of my own thing. So and can't get it out of my system. Here it is, 40 some years later, and I'm still at it. So
I kind of came, trapping was just, we grew up trapping.
yeah.
Some of my earliest memories are checking, little zero jump traps and that for weasels and squirrels, and which were worth money back then, but not now.
Yeah.
But my first discovery of the whole wide world out there was I had an old friend, Don Coleman was his name, and he taught me how to reload. Well, that's what we called it back then, hand loading for ammunition for guns. And he had this wondrous catalog called Herders.
Sure.
So that was my first discovery of what mail order was and that whole world that was out there. Because otherwise, whatever was at the Hudson Bay was the only thing that we knew of in our world, right? There was none of this access that we have today. So that was pretty fascinating to discover all that wonder stuff was out there, and you could get so much stuff. I can remember my first reloading kit, my press, my scale, my powder measure, and one die, and it cost $39. I was 12.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, a dozen number one long spring Victors, I think, were like $12 or $13, back in the day. So yeah, times and prices have certainly changed. So
yeah, and if we could find them used and pay that for each one, we'd be tickled today, wouldn't we?
Yeah, well, and of course now, then you could talk about the value of fur and how that's changed over the years too. But that's another. That's another. Yeah, that's a commodity versus product, So.
So you started trapping on your own, and did you start on, like with everybody else, with mosquitoes, with muskrats and squirrels, or where did you start?
We don't really trap squirrels here in our state, so they're actually considered a game animal. They're not really a fur bearer here, unlike they are in the north, in your country, or,
right.
or maybe in the New England states. But no, it's started with muskrats, and then went to fox trapping, and then that was kind of, I always multi-species trapped, but I do like land trapping better than water trapping. If push comes to shove, but I do enjoy both for sure. And that was back, we didn't have coyotes then at all. So it was lots of fox trapping. And then as the coyotes moved in, it kind of switched, and now it's basically coyote trapping with an occasional fox. So we just made that transition over primarily in the 1980s is when that kind of flipped. So
isn't that amazing though, how the coyote have moved in like that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And once they were here, it just, they were here, and they're, they'll be here forever. And yeah, it definitely just completely flipped in what we had to trap. And in a lot of respects, it wasn't really a fair trade, although I really enjoy coyote trapping. I mean, but to lose the foxes over the coyotes, it was kind of like, so our coyotes are a poor quality. They're not hugely desirable as compared to the Western type, with the good pale bellies. And I don't know what kind. You guys got good coyotes where you're at?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of north. Mine are a little bit bigger and a little heavier.
Okay.
Where my boy lives in, my one son lives in Red Deer, which is pretty much the center of Alberta between Edmonton and Calgary. And yeah, he gets the pales there. From there south are the pales. Our coyotes
Okay.
are much smaller than yours, and they
Yeah.
all look normal. I was giving Conrad a hard time. I says, half the ones you guys catch look like somebody's German Shepherd.
Yeah.
And I said, so is that interbreeding or is that just, genetics? And he says a lot of it's just genetics. Is that true?
I think, yeah, I think that's biologically they got to take the skulls out and do all kinds of measurements to see what genetic background is, in those coyotes. From what I understand, if there was some interbreeding with wild dogs or whatever, then sometimes you catch some that make you wonder, But
Yeah.
in fact, Conrad, he had one that he put on Facebook last fall, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah, that was
Well, he posted it up on our Facebook page, and oh my gosh, the people took him to task and all that. Like, I mean, it really looked like a German Shepherd. He told me that those sell really well for taxidermy.
they can, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well, no, let me coyotes that are really, really black or really, really odd in color will do very well. The ones that have a domestic dog look to it, maybe not so much. So.
Well, that was my feeling. Like, you get a melanistic. Is that it? Melanistic?
Melanistic.
Yeah, melanistic. The gene that brings out the black in them. There was a bobcat caught in Nova Scotia last winter, I believe, and it was just as black as, it's like a black panther. It was kind of cool, except for short-tailed black panther.
I did see that picture floating around online.
Yeah.
That is remarkable.
And we also get a color face called a canary in the martins, and they can be almost snow white. They can be like as yellow as a Tweety bird.
Mm-hmm.
One guy in Manitoba caught one, and it was just a little female. So it's in a 120, and the 120 covers half the body. And it's hanging there, and he took a picture of it hanging there. And I mean, it is absolutely just Tweety bird yellow, and except over the top of the head, it turns white, and it looks like a stuffed toy hanging there, like for the world, like a stuffed toy. Yeah. And oh my God, that took that about 20 hours to go around the world. And all of a sudden I was getting hate messages from the UK.
Yeah. It doesn't take long in some cases, for sure.
Yeah. So I started blocking and banning them like I always do. And it turned out that, for every message I was getting, there every dozen messages, they were all from the same person. I went and tracked my way back through followed the digital trail and all that, and they all had this one Facebook page that they all belonged to, and it was the same person over and over and over again. But when you're getting from a dozen different names, that you think that, oh my goodness, you stirred up the hornet's nest, but we hadn't.
Really? Interesting.
It was, and the guy just caught a very unique, canary. I mean, and it's worth nothing if you ship it off to the fur market. I mean, it just goes into the dye vat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the way, I was a fur buyer for a number of years. Well, during the big fur boom years, I bought fur, but yeah, anything that was out of the norm has no value in the fur market, as you said. But on the taxidermy market, that's another story. Some of that stuff does really, really well. So.
I think part of it is because they need to try and match them, to make anything out of it, right?
Right. Yeah. There's nothing there to put with it, So it's to stand alone, So.
Yeah. You started with the trapping, and did you progress then into making your own lures? Like, what came first? Lures that you wanted to become a a businessman at it? What? Give me the progression here.
When I was trapping, then I kind of played around with making lure a little bit, and then started selling trapping supplies, and then bought some fur, and then that just kind of snowballed because that was during the fur boom years where everybody wanted to be a trapper and everybody needed trapping equipment. So it was, that was pretty good times.
Yep.
And then, to be honest, we were so busy with all of that, or I was so busy with all that, my lure making really kind of went by this side. I didn't really make it and sell it like I probably should have in retrospect. Hindsight's 2020. But I kind of put it on the side burner and didn't go forward with it. And then basically in the I guess it'd be in the 90s, is kind of started pushing it again and working on developing more of a line and going from there. So yeah, that's kind of the story on that. And then now, between the YouTube show and what we do, we've got a good following on our lure line, our Leatherwood line, and our Top Dog Predator bait. So yeah, it's been good for us. So.
Is that your number one bait, the Top Dog?
Yeah, it's actually really we make a liquid predator bait as well, but the Top Dog by far is by far our biggest seller for sure. So, and it's based on bobcat meat, but that's about the only similarity between that and Nelson bait formula, which is out there, and a lot of people have worked off of that formula and enhanced that formula or whatever. But my only similarity to the Nelson formula is the bobcat meat base. So, but
it's amazing how many animals eat cat. Even cat eats cat. Like with our lynx, they're very cannibalistic.
Yeah.
And right now we're in a big upswing. There's lots and lots of rabbits, and so she might have 8-9 kittens.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Sometimes you go out and then go down your trail, and then of course we trap in snow all the time, and sometimes it looks like a herd of lynx went down the trail in front of you, and she'll have 7, 8, 9 kittens, whatever. If you catch one of them, the others often will eat it.
Okay.
I did just watch one of your episodes about that, where you were hanging multiple snares around the bait as well to try to keep them catching multiples and keep them from eating each other as well.
Yeah,
you did catch.
It seldom works. In theory, I mean, most of the time when we I don't know anything about bobcat because we don't have bobcat, but most of the time with lynx, you have a pen and you've got your bait, your lure or whatever in there. Sometimes you got meat hanging in there, and sometimes the cat just walks right in through the snare. You have a single snare, boom, you got the cat. Other times you'll circle, so you always have these snares around the outside for the circlers, right? And so you would think that when they, there's one there that they're eating on them, they would occasionally circle. They don't. They all follow that cat back right in there. Like, it's frustrating. I've had some where I've just had to give up on the pen because you'd catch one and the others would eat it, and then you catch another one and then they'd eat it. It was on and on. It was so frustrating. But I always tell everybody that if you have a cat, and if you feel like you got chest pain and you feel like a heart attack's coming on or whatever, that you throw the cat out the door before you take the 2 aspirin and call 911. Because you're tomorrow's fancy feast, man. I talked with an old fellow about it. I says, why is that? Why are cats cannibalistic that way? And he says, well, I think it's because of their social structure. They groom one another. Mom grooms them, they groom one another, they groom mom, that kind of stuff. And that's how it starts. And, when they're dead, and then they're grooming them, and then it's like, maybe that tastes good. I don't know. It's like, I'm not sure. I don't know whether he was right or not, but they're the only ones that do it. You just don't have it happen with anything else.
We don't have that problem here. And I wonder if that relates to your harshness of your winters and all the snow on the ground and
just the lynx taking advantage of an opportunity in harsh,
that's interesting. But we generally, we just really don't have problems with cannibalistic animals and or animals getting eaten in traps. It's just that's not. I mean, like if a rabbit gets caught in a, something comes by, that's
Right.
one thing. But as far as a targeted animal, generally, one we really only have trouble with are muskrats and mink coming along. But as far as bobcats or coyotes or that kind of thing, on rare occasion we hear about a coyote getting caught in a snare, and if the winter is harsh by our standards, occasionally there will be one that will get eaten by other coyotes, but that is very rare. So I don't know, just thinking about that in relation to what you're just talking about, I wonder if it's just the harshness of your environment up there.
It could be, but there's a couple other, even more confusing sides to it. One, the lynx can't eat frozen meat, so it has
Really?
to eat them when they're still warm and thawed. Because
Right.
this happens all the time. I'll catch a lynx and be handling it, turn it over, and it'll have blood on the fur, and I'll think, oh dear. So what's happened is that it has been eating one that's been caught, and then it has to lay on top of it to thaw it enough to eat it some more. And so then it
Really?
ends up getting blood in its fur because their tooth structure isn't such that they can tear open frozen meat. Really, the only thing that eats frozen meat, I mean, wolves will, but like Wolverines do. Wolverines will eat
Hmm.
frozen meat very well. And the only other thing that ever gets ate is if I catch coyotes out on my big line, my line out in the big bush, wolves eat them. That's the only coy wolf we got around here is that pile of turds with hair sticking out of it, because they do not know. They do not like one another. Wolves are so extremely territorial. I mean, and it's the easiest thing to use against them when you're trying to trap them. But we
Yeah.
also had one, and I'm not sure what was going on here. I don't think, like sometimes when you have a spare wolf in a pack, you'll have one too many females or whatever. She gets kicked out, and so then she goes off to find another pack, and it's just nature's way of keeping those genetics spreading around, right? And
Yeah.
we caught this one, and she was just a beautiful wolf. Like she was just a black and blue and a gorgeous wolf. It would have been worth a lot of money, but she had mange. And that's one of the big problems that you have with any pack animal is if one has it, they all have it,
Sure.
because of that pack, right? And so it was terrible. Like I move her and the snow would be covered in hair as you'd pull it, and it would pull off her. And so I took and hauled it away from the bait site, like miles away. The wolf pack followed me, and that night, and it was cold. It was like we were talking about. It was cold. It was probably, I don't know, 30, 32 below zero, something like that. And they ate her. So I don't know whether she was a family member or if she was one of these outliers that they had adopted in. I'm not sure. It's kind of one of those, and I don't know why it's an important question to me, but I'd like to know whether she was actually a family member of that pack or if she'd been an outlier that had been adopted in. But why did they follow her and eat her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Hmm.
And I guess in thinking too, Rich, I guess we have so few foxes now that it's kind of a moot subject, really. But if when we had that transition with the coyotes moving in and flipping the dynamic of the population, basically the coyotes ate a lot of foxes for sure in traps.
Right.
So we definitely had that, and that was certainly territorial, and but and that still happens, but I wouldn't say it's common because we don't have enough foxes for it to be commonly happening. So that's one of it's just that's interesting. So.
You used to have a lot of foxes. What was an average season's catch for fox?
I mean, it depends. When I was in high school, I would riding around on a bicycle or whatever. I'd catch 20 or so in a season. But guys that would take it more seriously in the hundreds, or had the time developed and the ground during those years. That was those fur boom years. Probably the biggest difficulty here, and probably there too. Well, maybe not. Here is just getting enough ground to trap because everybody was trapping. And going out and getting permission from farmers and lining up ground. Well, everybody had a family member that trapped if they didn't trap, and
Yeah.
or friends or whatever. So it was difficult to line up lots of ground to trap. So for those that had a lot of it tied up, then they could do quite well in numbers. So, but yeah, there was guys that caught. well, a few guys that caught maybe 300, 400, 500 foxes, and then or maybe in some instances more, but generally pretty respectable catch if somebody was talking about a 50 to 100, So, but when about the only place you can still do that in the U.S. is on the East Coast in Maryland, and in that area they still got a lot of foxes. So, but
We still have a lot of fox on the prairies. My son, I don't know, he averages probably 30 fox a year, and he'll do double that in coyotes, and he's in that Red Deer area. Is there anything on the face of the earth that has more fleas on it than a fox?
I don't know. Our coyotes got lice. How about you guys got lice in your coyotes?
I don't know about lice, but they do get the shoulder louse, like the dog mite. It comes from the domestic dog, and they lose that nice patch up on the ruff. Yeah,
Right.
We get that, and I mean, it's just a matter of you just got to keep trapping them and trapping them. That's the two things they get, that and mange.
Yeah,
Makes for. It's too bad because I mean, even so, I mean, I sent a couple to. They were the only things that sold at this last fur auction at Fur Harvesters, and that was such a shame with the virus happening and all. But I sold two that were damaged, like they had the ruff missing out of them. But I mean, I skinned them and sent them anyway. I got $70 each for them.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, they should have been, if they'd have been complete, they would have been double that or upwards of $200, right?
Right. They so typically on your coyotes, say a year ago, what would coyotes in your area bring?
It was nothing to average 140.
Okay.
That's an average. So you'd have some that were over 200, and you'd have some of those $80 ones, but yeah.
Now, are coyotes your primary target, or you multi-species trap as well, or depends on the time of the year?
We have 14 fur bearers in Alberta, and I have trappable populations of all of them except for badger, bobcat, and coon. They're too far south they're not up here in the north. And my skunks aren't out during trapping season. They're hibernating at that point. But I trap everything. Yeah. The hardest to trap is the wolves because I don't have a great line I don't have a lot of ungulates. I don't have a lot of moose, deer, and elk.
Okay.
And wolves take a lot of food. We had a study done, and 4,000 wolves, it takes 20,000 ungulates, so a population of 20,000 ungulates to produce enough food for 4,000 wolves and to keep that ungulate population self-sustaining. So that's a lot. Yeah. We have about, they say right around between 84 and 8,600 wolves in Alberta. So we've got lots. Yeah.
So that's 45,000 roughly deer, moose, whatever.
You just to feed them. That doesn't include me having one to eat or
right.
Lord knows how many get hit by vehicles and stuff like that, I mean, then and the bears, black bears are just huge. This time of the year, I'll give it another month or so, and the calf moose will be being born, and black bear are just terrible on that. Like they, I don't know how many in my lifetime. I'll bet you a dozen black bear I've shot. That the black bear was tracking a cow moose in labor. Every now and then there'd be a little bit of snow or whatever, and you see a few spots of blood, and you'd know what was going on. She's in labor, and that black bear's tracking because they'll pick it up and eat it as quick as it's dropped, right?
Yeah.
Like on our big trap lines, our registered trap lines out in the bush. The difference between registered and residential is on private land.
Okay.
So on private land, I get a special residential permit, and then in Alberta, it has to be written permission. And if I'm going to use killing snares, that I have to have a special form filled out for that. Government, right? Yep. But then our registered lines are all the national land, the federal land that isn't owned by anybody, and there are registered lines we can buy and sell them. And my registered line is is 4 townships, so that's 144 square miles, and I have exclusive rights to trap it. Nobody else can trap it without my permission, and I can build and maintain cabins there, that kind of stuff, right?
Well, it's awesome.
Man, that
Oh yeah.
sounds like a dream.
So you are living the dream.
I know. And that's the funny part. Like, I mean, when we started all of this, when we started the TV show, and all these people were just so fascinated. And then, but it was the strangest thing that they were fascinated about, because they were actually fascinated in the life. You know, it was how we were living, how we did it, and that kind of stuff. And the probably I've said this before, but the number one complaint that we get is that, well, you didn't show that. You know, you didn't show. Well, there's nothing there, you know. I mean, we do that all the time, right? But I guess it's the entire, you know, the whole experience that's important, right? And
Yeah.
actually, it's been a blessing doing the TV show, because it has made me that much more grateful for what I have.
Right.
I never knew. I mean, when you're raised up doing this stuff, I was 18 before I ate beef. You know, like, I mean, you lived on moose meat, you know, and I would, as I told one of my guys, guests on podcasts, you know, when first time I went to the big city, I was 18, and I was not popular with the ladies. Like, I mean, the stories I had to tell when everybody sat down were not as cool as the stories they had, you know, because it was nothing if you're out in the springtime, and you know, it was bear season, you shot a bear and you had fresh bear steak that night and stuff like that. Those are not stories that'll get you picked up, let me tell you.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you live a lifestyle that few people do, so that's pretty cool. And like I said, you're living the dream as compared to. I think a lot of us have this, you know, certainly when we were younger, and probably due to a certain point, got this mystique about trapping and wilderness trapping, and having the line with the cabins and all that, you know, and so yeah, that's very cool that you you know, you're the guy. So yeah.
And you know, and I mean, living in off grid, you know, we have generator and we burn our own wood and all that kind of stuff, but living off grid is just that much more work on top of trapping, you know. And trapping is a lot of work to begin with, and you know, you have all those hundreds of kilometers of trails and all those traps. Like when marten season's going on, I've anywhere from 140 to 160 marten sets out, and then you've got otter and beaver and lynx and wolf and coyote and mink and all that on top of it. But I mean, it is so funny because I check every 4 days. We have no check laws when it comes to killing stuff. Any of our killing snares, and our snares have to be killing by law. Isn't that funny? And you guys not allowed to have a killing snare.
Yeah, relaxing locks and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. We want it done. Done and over.
I mean, there's a certain point to that for sure, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't have to worry about the neighbor's dogs or anything like that, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
When we do foot holding, in the residential areas, like on a residence license, like my home quarter here, I have to check it every 24 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the law there. Out in the big bush, I have to check every 48 hours. Well, that becomes hard to do when you have, on average, I have over 300 kilometers of trail that I follow, and I go out there every 4 days, and I spend 3 days checking the line. Well, that's 3 big days, and especially then you throw TV on top of that, you end up, you know, it's very, very full days. So I couldn't physically get back to those snares again, even while I was, or those traps again in 48 hours. So I don't do a lot of foot holding. When there are a couple of different times in the winter, like out for wolves, we'll go out and we'll be out there for a couple of weeks in a straight shot, and I will set up then footholds for lynx and footholds for wolves.
Okay. So typically when you go out there, do you go a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time? How do
3 days.
do you 3 days at a time?
3 days. Yeah.
And then you come, so and then you live, are you living on the line then? Or are you living in a different location, or?
We have a home. Our line is 3 hours away from our home.
Okay.
And we, like, I don't know how many days a year we'd live out there. Probably work out to about a third of the year that we'd live on the line.
Okay.
Like there are different times that we're out there for several weeks at a time, and Christmas is always out there, which is the best place ever.
Sure. Yeah.
There's so many other things that I mean we've chosen with doing the TV and all the social media stuff and all that goes with it. You need to have time in an office like when I'm sitting in here right now.
Sure. Sure.
It's great. I've been tuning into the shows that you've put out. And the ones I always end up clicking on are the ones that, stuff we can't catch here. So it's always cool to see, working your Wolverine sets and links, and you get a kick out of that. Just someday that's a bucket list thing somehow, some way, somewhere.
It's funny. We get a lot of those comments, exactly those comments that this is what's so different, and it's something that we don't see. And in that way, like Wolverine is very popular. Wolves are very, very popular, and which is unfortunate for me because the Wolves showed up once this year on my line, and you have these huge baits out there. Like I can use roadkill, and it's really a silly thing the way the government goes about this, but because of the CWD, the chronic wasting disease, you can't go across certain boundaries. Like there's wildlife management units, right? And so I can't take a roadkill from one wildlife management unit to another wildlife management unit, even though the road outside my house is a dividing line between two wildlife management units. But I can get a permit to pick up roadkill. And let me tell you, that sounds pretty easy until you have a moose laying there. There are people that have slowed down while it's snowing, and there'll be a fresh moose kill. This happened up over to the north of me here, a couple of miles, I don't know, 10, 15 miles. It goes up over a big ridge, big set of hills, and the moose would get hit right alongside the road. And so I don't know, it's late in December, and it's snowing pretty heavy, and it's kind of a bad spot, but I got the truck and trailer pulled over to the side, and I'm taking care of this moose, trying to pick up this moose and to take out to my trap line. And the guy slows down, and right in the middle, I look up, and I've got the chainsaw going, and I'm taking it apart with the chainsaw, right? And then you can see his wife. His wife looks over and starts yelling at him, "Go, go, go!" I don't know if they thought I was chainsaw murdering somebody in the ditch or what it was, but a moose is a big animal.
So far, I found through your stories that you have a way to pick up the ladies.
Yeah. I've been really successful at that one, yes.
Hey, Rich here. Sandy and I are pleased to announce the launch of our exclusive community, Trapping Inc. Nation. We've created the community to connect more closely with our fans, friends, and supporters without the interference and censorship of social media companies. By making this community subscriber exclusive, we can share thoughts and ideas freely without the censored photos, shadow banning, and deplatforming of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Trolls will be a thing of the past, as not one will spend a nickel to protest on a paid site. Here you're going to get to see the new Trapping Inc. videos months ahead of YouTube and Amazon Prime availability. New podcasts will premiere here for a week as well, and we are going to be sharing articles on trapping and guns and shooting, as well as our new TV series, Married to the Hunt. The forum is here for everyone to post on and interact. You can message us directly. Post and interact with all the other subscribers. We ask that you be respectful and helpful. This whole venture is about taking the Trapping Inc. TV community to the next level, of building a community of shared interest and interacting with you, our fans. Who knows where we can go from here? To sign up, just go to locals.com and sign up for a free account, then search for Trapping Inc. and subscribe. $3 per month is the minimum fee we can charge, and that is where we have set it. That's simple. Just go to locals.com, open a free account, and then subscribe to Trapping Inc. Help us spread the truth about our way of life and the responsible and ethical management of the wild resources. And now back to today's show.
How long have you had this trap line then, the registered one?
This one, I've had a trap line my whole life.
Okay.
And some of them were like this even before they were formalized. I mean, trap lines were actually Alberta was broke into registered trap lines in, I think, 1925. but before that, it was a very informal thing. And even after that, like, I mean, it was nothing to call up somebody and go trapping on their place or trap on their trap line or, you know, whatever. And there was no paperwork or anything involved. It was just later in life that sort of thing started out. So I've had trap lines my entire life. This current line I bought 6 years ago.
Okay. Okay. So are they expensive to buy, or is it? I mean, I'm assuming they must be.
Well, it depends on what you're buying, you know,
Okay.
because technically all you're buying is the land, or not the land, the improvements, and any,
Okay.
you know, you might get traps or you might whatever deal you can make, but you're basically buying the improvements, which is the cabins, and that's all that's being sold. And then you have the government gives you the right to that trap line. I paid $60,000 for mine, and
Okay.
it came with 3 cabins. I really didn't get nothing else. It was
Okay.
some old people, and he had been a farmer, and so most everything was built out of old reused stuff. And we've replaced, you know, like we've replaced windows and all that. I've done a little bit to the cabin as far as renovating it and just opening it up and putting in new, you know, new stove and stuff that I didn't worry about dying in the middle of the night over. And that,
Right. Right.
you know, that farmer
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you know, if you're looking at buying a trap line over on the mountains, like the one side of Alberta is bordered by the Rocky Mountains. Our western border is the Rocky Mountains, and trap lines over there. It's kind of a I don't want to say it's kind of a dirty secret, but it's kind of one of those things. I guess we're gonna have to address at some point. A trapper is the only one that can use a ATV or a snowmobile above the tree line.
Okay.
And they're the only ones that can have a cabin out in the wild. Okay, you can't. Nobody else can go out and build a cabin in the wild. Only a trap line can. And so, the people that buy them over on the eastern slopes of the Rockies, they're usually hunters. Okay, and of course we have bighorn sheep, and that's you know, a very desirable animal to hunt, and
Sure.
so that's what ends up happening. Some of those trap lines over there have traded for upwards of $1 million.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not a trapper income
No.
level right there.
No. My son is a junior on a trap line at Rocky Mountain House, and he actually has Baseline Mountain is on his trap line, and it's not a very big trap line. I think it's under 2 townships, but with Baseline Mountain in the middle, it becomes hard. Access is hard, right? Because mountains are not easy to go up and down, that kind of stuff. So he like the fellow that he's a junior for is an old man, and he has you know, some dementia, and his son is no interest in trapping. He just loves going out to the trap line with his dad and help cut the grass, that kind of stuff. So he's never going to trap it. And they built a really nice log cabin on it and all that kind of stuff. And his dad goes out in the summertime, but there is a law that says that trap lines have to produce. Okay, you have to be producing first, so they have to sign up Matt, and Matt goes out there and he does traps the trap line for them, takes the fur, does the fur reports and all that, so that it's being utilized and they can justify still owning it. But the day is coming when it's going to be being sold, and
Sure.
the son does not have a trapper's license and does not have any want to become a trapper, so he's not going to be able to keep it, and it will sell it probably in the quarter to $300,000 range. And like Matt said, you'll never ever pay for that in a lifetime. You know,
No.
like mine at $60,000 have more than paid for it in fur alone, right? In those 6 years, and it especially if Martin would stay up.
Yeah.
There is nothing that is better than a marten. They're like skinning a squirrel. They're probably less work than a squirrel because they're a little bigger, and there's no fat or anything on them. They're just so easy. If you didn't have to flip them, you know, if a guy could get wire stretchers for them so you didn't have to flip them once, you know, they would be the perfect animal. And they were in 13, I think I hit 200 and some dollars was my best, but my average would have been like 160, 170 for Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
2013, that was a, you know, crazy fur sale. I'm referring to NAFA, North American Fur Auction sale. I was actually listening to that sale.
Yep.
I mean, they must have been, when that place was done, they probably didn't even have to sweep the floor, because I mean, they sold the house out. You know, everything sold. It was an amazing sale to listen to.
I know all the people involved, and it's kind of funny. And NAFA was really, really high on themselves at that moment. Well, because they were just shy of $1 billion in sales that year.
Yeah.
$1 billion. Think about that, right?
Yeah.
And they were making an offer to another auction house. And like, you better come with us, because if you're not, you're either on the bus or under it, kind of thing, right? They were pretty arrogant. Yeah, very arrogant, right? Very un-Canadian like. Anyway, because I'm talking to the other guy, like, and I've had this conversation with him, and he said to me, he says, "There's no way that this stays. There's no way that these artificially inflated prices can stay up here." And part of what was driving it was all the ranch mink and what the ranch mink were going for, and the fact that it was all that stuff was being smuggled into China and Asia and Russia, and nobody was paying any customs and all that. So it was all grotesquely inflated, right? Yeah. So anyway, he was right. It was all there was a big house of cards there, but and it ended up collapsing. It's too bad what happened with this virus here, because I think we were going to have a great year. What was your thoughts on that?
I think we were approaching a decent year. Yeah. I was had been a NAFA receiving agent for several years, a number of years. I was in 2013 that season, and of course NAFA, that the story on that. But I thought so too. I thought even for our eastern fur, eastern U.S. or Midwestern, however you look at it, we were approaching a season where we were going to see things being pretty decent, and actually probably being possibly higher than a year ago. So yeah, I was optimistic in the fall, and then of course here NAFA is much larger than fur harvesters in terms of trapper
recognition,
consigning goods,
Yeah.
So, but and that definitely threw a big wrench in it. And then the virus, I mean, it's just kind of been like a domino effect of everything that can go wrong. Seems like it's just happened this year. So yeah, it's been a tough year.
I see they announced their August 24th will be their second auction this year, and it's going to be an actual in-person auction, which is good. Yeah, you're right. NAFA and fur harvesters is like Canada and the U.S. Fur harvesters is 10% of NAFA, but they're still standing now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're doing things ultimately smarter or better than NAFA or something. I mean, clearly they're still around. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how that has worked out. Do you think, like, I was watching, everybody panicked when NAFA went down, and they, everybody's, it's the end of the world, where are we going to sell and all? And I says, well, the vacuum doesn't stay empty long. And, everything moved in, like GFW came to Canada. We'd never, people didn't even know who they were. And all of a sudden they were here buying, and they were paying good money. So it said to me that it was going to be a really good auction.
Yeah.
And for the virus to happen and that's just too dang bad. But I saw even results from some of the fur tables and the private auctions that you folks had in the States, and that were, even the Easterns were pulling like a $70 average on the coyotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good money.
Yeah, real good money. And that may have not happened a lot, but there were clearly a lot of them that were in the $40 range, which actually is still really good for an Eastern coyote, or 40 to 50. So yeah, there was definitely speculation that that coyote market was going to be as good, if not better, than a year ago. So, but as the season progressed, that definitely started to change for sure. We had Gronwald, GFW, show up. Since we were not being a NAFA receiving agent, I reached out to Guy and I said, hey, well, I've got all these shippers. They don't really have a specific place to go with their fur. If you would like to come in our place and buy fur an afternoon or whatever, you're welcome to. So he said, yeah, we'll do it. And I think it was March 8th. It was a Sunday. We had people lined up for, he had planned on 2 hours and we had them lined up for like 3.5 hours, cleared the road, and he bought way more fur than what he anticipated. So it was,
Yeah, we almost had to go get a secondary truck for him.
yeah, so it was a surprise, I think, for him, but it was, there was a lot of fur. And that was a Sunday, and the next day he actually quit doing all routes because the virus thing was really starting to heat up. And then he maintained the Canadian routes for a while yet. And then he, so I mean, it was rapidly, the whole thing declined quickly right after that Sunday that he was at our place. But anyways.
It went downhill in a big hurry, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. It really did. So
tell me, one of the things that I see when I'm on the internet and that on the forums and all, you guys sell a lot of fur green, like just frozen.
Yeah.
That's normal.
It's pretty common. Yeah. And I remember years ago going up to Toronto to the sale back when it was Hudson Bay.
Yep.
And going in the sample room. I don't know if you've ever been there or at fur harvesters. And you could always pick out the Canadian put up because it was just always so meticulously done. It was beautiful. Not to say that some of the North American or the lower 48 guys didn't do a good job, but overall the Canadian put up was superior to what we were doing. At least that was my impression at the time.
Well, I know some that are really awful, so don't beat yourself up over it. But I'd never seen, I didn't understand what these guys were talking about when they were talking about in the round. I mean, lots of people will sell in the round and, frozen, that kind of stuff, especially the hunters will do that, right? They want to sell them that way. And but then these people were talking about green and see, I was going by our legal description of green, where until it's tanned, it's considered green.
Sure.
So even if it's dried or salted or anything else, it's still considered green. And then after a while, I come to understand, it's like, what, you just skinned it and you're selling it to them that way? So if you're the buyer, then do you put it up yourself? Is that how it works, or?
Right. The buyer would, or all fur processing centers essentially is how that works. So in the buyers, it kind of changed over the years. We used to have a buyer basically in every town, small town, it seemed like, and there were certainly 2 or 3 per county. And then of course, as the thing fell apart in the late 80s, 87, 88, then that all kind of changed. But yeah, the fur buyer would be the fur processing center essentially, and so a lot of fur was sold green. And it was interesting when Gronwald was at our place, guys who had this meticulous, beautiful board stretch put up on their fur, their coon, and I mean, just awesome jobs. And he kind of, burst their bubble because he said, you guys are just wasting your time. We don't require that type of put up because they sell most of their stuff already tanned, have it tanned and then sell it. He said, we don't really, we just don't need that type of put up for where we're at in the industry. And because don't get me wrong, you did a beautiful job. However, you just didn't need to do all that.
It's just crazy because to them, like the guy behind him was selling it green, basically raw.
Yeah.
Same price for the guy that would have a beautiful put up and spend all the time in the world on it. Same price if it was the same coon, and it's just like, man.
I always say that is that Mother Nature made that pelt, and it's as good as it's ever going to be. All I can ever do is make it worse, and so all I'm trying to do is limit my damage to it. I know people who have their secret recipe for how they wash their coyotes and everything. I don't wash a coyote. You've been and looked at in the fur room and that kind of stuff at the auction and that. You ever take the time to go through top lot?
Oh yeah, that was always the first one you looked at, because it was like.
But some of them are just terribly put up. But the fur is the fur, right?
Yeah. Within reason, yeah, for sure. I mean, I know exactly what you're saying. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it always amazed me that did, because I mean the first time I ever looked at a top lot, it was like, are you kidding me? Because some of them clearly belonged there, and they were well put up, and they smelled pretty. They'd been through the magic solution and all that stuff, but some of it was like, one leg was longer than the other, and and just terrible condition, dirty or blood on them. But you can't fool at the fur grader, right?
Yeah, the underlying, yeah, they knew what they had. So yeah.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
you kind of question their judgment as to what they put in that sample string,
yeah.
So you would you would think they'd get a better choice out of the bale, maybe, or out of the whole lot. But
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah, you would surprise the heck out of me. The only one that well, no, I actually saw a Wolverine that was in top lot, and I don't know how long he'd had it before he put it up, but the bottom jaw was still in it.
really,
Yeah, so the hide had dried to the bottom jaw, and he could no longer get it off, so he just left it in the hide when he put it up.
that sounds like some sort of roadkill.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's worth more with the molars and the canines in there.
Yeah. Well, the teeth on a Wolverine are worth more. Most people would never recognize them because they're not at all what you think they look like. They're very heavy like a bear, but not sharp at all. They're very blunt.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very good for grinding and busting bone and that kind of stuff. When did the whole store idea come? How did that come about? And you're also into taxidermy?
Yeah. So I mean, we always basically always had a place where people could walk in and buy trapping supplies, because we got, your percentage of trappers per square mile is probably not too great, whereas or township.
Yeah.
Ours is quite high. We have a lot of trappers. Particularly in the 70s and 80s, we have a whole bunch. So the state of Indiana right now, we're with fur prices and whatever. We have about 4,000 or so licensed trappers in the state. But if you go to the state of Pennsylvania, I want to say they have like 50, 60,000 trappers in that state. So they got a bunch of trappers. So we always did kind of have a walk-in store. So in the 87, 88 season, when things pretty much just fell apart, basically it was like somebody shut the faucet off in terms of business, as wasn't as usual for sure. It had declined significantly in sales and trapping supplies, and I don't know if you guys felt that in Canada as much as we did in the United States, particularly in a more commercial fur section. But in order to stay in business, kind of just tried some different things. Some of it didn't work particularly well, but started doing taxidermy, and that kind of clicked, and that's been good for us and keeps us quite busy. So we've been doing taxidermy now for going on 26, 27 years, I guess, 20, 25, quite a number of years. So we stay quite busy with that as well. So, but
And overwhelmingly, you do whitetail deer?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's our number one animal. So.
Yeah, that's the national animal of the U.S. I say that I'm from Alberta, and everybody wants to know where my whitetail deer are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you even have whitetails in your part of the province? Okay.
Yeah. We haven't shot a book animal off our own home quarter yet, but mostly because we don't hunt deer very often. I like bighorn. Or bighorn sheep are probably my favorite, and
Okay.
other than that, then moose, elk, that kind of stuff. Not real big fan of eating. We have both whitetail and mule deer here.
Okay.
I'm just not a huge fan of eating them, and I'm kind of the person that it's very important to eat it, right?
Yeah. Well, when the alternative is moose or elk or sheep, I assume.
Yeah. Well, sheep isn't really good eating, but by the time you earn one of them, it's like I'm eating it no matter what. Damn it, I earned it. But nobody ever ate a steak from a moose or an elk and said, "Geez, I wish I had a whitetail."
Yeah, exactly. So, but here in the U.S., I always say basically everything's driven by largemouth bass and white-tailed deer. I mean, those are those
Turkeys.
two.
Turkeys too.
Yeah, it's a lot lesser. It's nothing like white-tailed deer and largemouth bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, turkeys is a pretty big deal. Of course, National Wild Turkey Federation has their convention, and it's a pretty big, 3 or 4 day deal. So yeah, it's
yeah, we've been to the States a few times, Montana and Pennsylvania, to go turkey hunting. We've had a lot of
okay.
yeah. We never got any over in Pennsylvania, but and then you could only hunt till noon on Sunday, so we drove into New York City. We were in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, a little town of Dallas, just south of Scranton, is where we were. So we drove over to New York City. I got thrown out of the Empire State Building because I had a Leatherman on my belt, and it was like, this is how stupid it was. I mean, how much of a hick I was. Is like, the security guard says, "Well, you can't go up in the elevator and that." And I says, "What? Why? I mean, it's a Leatherman. Like, I mean, if you got underwear on, you have a Leatherman on your belt. You know what I mean? It's just natural. And you have a pocket knife in your pocket and another one around your neck. I mean, that's just nature. That's the way we live." And he says, "Well, you might, hold people hostage." I said, "What, in a box that goes up and down a building? Like, I'd be pretty dumb to do that, wouldn't I?" So he says, "Well, your choice, I mean, there was no arguing with this guy. Your choice is," he says, you throw it in the garbage or you leave. I said, "Oh, I'm not throwing it in the garbage." I left. So we didn't get to the Statue of Liberty either, because I once again had a Leatherman on my belt. Oh well, everybody's got their.
You were quite a threat to the security. But
Yeah, exactly. On your you talk about the number of trappers that you have in Indiana, and that Pennsylvania has so much more. I noticed that in our days when we were doing a hunting TV show, and we went to what is the big show there every year? The
National Trappers.
Harrisburg.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the sports show. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not believe there were that many people, and it was a whole thing. Like, I mean, I'm looking at a half a dozen white-tailed deer out my office window right now. Like, I mean, that's just a normal thing, and these people would sit there and tell you an hour-long story about the doe they shot 2 years ago and that kind of stuff. And I thought, man, these guys they've got it bad. They got the drive, they got the want.
I've mentioned this before, but Gary Schroeder, who writes the fur market column for Fur Fishing Game magazine, he owns Moscow Hide and Fur out in Moscow, Idaho. He, back in the summer of 1976, he comes out of Indiana, and I met with him because he was the one that kind of originally got me started buying fur, not just some kid. Anyways, he told me at that time, this is years ago, he said he loved this business, but he didn't like the conversation because it's always the same stories from, whoever you run into, in the case of the taxidermy, it's, or hunters or whatever, it's the big old doe that, and at the time I didn't quite really appreciate it. And now in retrospect, I, realized a long time ago what he was talking about. So, and you got to realize, obviously, it was exciting for the guy that's telling you the story, but
Yep.
But I could rubber stamp the story. Rarely do I hear a new story. So
You could write the story, just stick their name in here and there. And I know we get that all the time, and people come up to us in the show excited to talk about and tell their stories, and I understand where they're coming from. So I've listened to a lot of them, but it's so cool that there's still that enthusiasm, that excitement, right? I mean, what a world.
Exactly. Well, that's the driving force behind all that. So for sure, So
yeah. You folks going to go to the NTA this year?
If they have it.
If they have it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sad state of affairs. The FTA convention, the Fur Takers of America convention, was scheduled for here in Indiana in June, and so that convention has been canceled.
Okay.
And that fairgrounds actually has been shut down through the end of June. So like the county fairs or 4-H fairs,
Mhm.
in a lot of cases aren't happening. The Purdue University basically heads up the 4-H program in the state, and so they've already, set the groundwork for a number of these fairs that, that of course have been a tradition here for years and years, or
Yeah.
they're just not open. So I guess what are the two, the Southeast and the Southwest regionals, NTA have already been canceled, I think.
Yeah, the West, I know the Western was, yes.
Yeah. And so I guess we'll have to wait and see what the NTA decides, for Michigan, and what transpires over the next, I don't know what their last cancel date is to make that decision,
Yeah.
but they've got probably a few weeks to play. But yeah, we will definitely be there. We never miss the Fur Tiger National and the NTA National, but we'd love to go. That's always one of the cool things of the summer for sure. But yeah, if they have it. How about yourself?
Well, we've been to two of them. We were to Pecatonica, Illinois, and
Okay.
then we were to Escanaba. We missed
Okay.
last year. We went to Africa and hunting, and so we missed last year. But and we kind of kicked myself in the butt because everybody's saying, "Well, it's way too far south. It's not going to be good. It's the turnout won't be good." And I understand it was great, but
it was pretty hot outside, but the facility was quite large interior wise and had air conditioning. So yeah, it was a very nice convention. So
most everybody was in the same giant building. I mean, it had different wings or whatever,
yeah,
but everybody.
that's cool.
Yeah,
it was nice.
And the facility in Michigan for the NTA that's scheduled in the latter part of July, it's been there before in Kalamazoo, and that's a very nice facility too. So
Oh, good.
yeah,
It's only a 36-hour drive for us, so we're thinking about it for sure.
that's a long drive.
That's okay. When you live where we live, everything is by hours. Like Calgary is 8 hours away, and Edmonton is 5 hours away. Like that kind of stuff. You just that's how we judge everything, is by hours, and that's usually at 75, 80 miles an hour. It depends what you can get away with as far as the police, right?
So do you even have a speed limit up there?
We do.
Okay.
On on divided highways would be about 70 miles an hour. Be 110 kilometers an hour. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That's the way it is here. So for the most part.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's some places out west that are 80 miles an hour in the more remote areas, but
we used to be Montana didn't have a speed limit.
Common. What's that?
Montana didn't have a speed limit. I've got a great story for this one. I fished in the United States as a professional walleye fisherman on the PWT, and of course, you're traveling. I had a big diesel truck with dual rear wheels and pulling a big fully loaded tournament boat and everything. And in Montana, the signs, there was a speed limit for trucks, what they considered trucks. To me, that's a semi, right? And for the rest, it was whatever was prudent and safe. That was their words on their sign, was the speed limit, whatever was prudent and safe. So I'm going. I think they caught me. I think I was in one of the. I was going through one of the Indian reservations. It makes no difference. I was on I think it was on Highway 2. Anyway, middle of the night, and I'm trying to get home. Had tournament finished. I'd left early that morning. I think I'd left Lake Erie or something, and now I'm in Montana, and just pulling her hard all the way home, and I'm going through in the middle of the night at 85, 90 miles an hour, and it's nobody on the highway. That's the best thing about West, right? It's pretty empty out there. This policeman pulls me over and he's going to give me a ticket. I said, "Well, how come you can give me a ticket? There's no speed limit." He says, "It's a truck." I said, "Well, yeah, sure, it's a truck. I'm pulling a boat." He says, "No, it's a truck." He says, "You have to follow truck speed limits." I says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, this is what's considered a truck. So you have to follow that limit there." And I says, "No, a truck you're talking about semi trucks." So we argued back and forth, and finally he says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, where I come from," I says, "Look, you tell by my plate, I'm not from around here. So, the only thing I can base it on is what I know what a truck is. And one argument, and he goes to turn away, and he comes back, he says, wait a minute. He says, on the sign, he says, whatever is prudent and safe. He says, when was 90 miles an hour prudent and safe in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
So I got a $50 ticket, and I says, so how does this work? And he says, well, you can give me you can give me the money, or he says you can wait until the morning and pay the clerk. I pulled a 50 out, give it to him. I said, thank you very much. And
Yeah.
I guess instead off going 90.
yeah.
He kind of did have the comeback for you, though, I guess.
Well, yeah, he did. It was I hadn't won. I thought I was actually going to win. I have lots of police stories when I was traveling doing that stuff. But I mean, the great part about down there, you just pay the fine and away you go. Or up here, it's you get demerits, and then after so many demerits, you don't get to drive anymore. So I'll take the pay the fine any day, right?
Yeah.
This has been a blast, guys, and I want to do this in person if we all get to the NTA, or maybe I'll stop in Indiana on one way or the other or whatever, and we'll do it in person. Tell everybody how they can find you. List out those names again, and what websites they can find you on.
Well, we got Hoosier Trapper Supply. That's our supply chain there. We're also on YouTube, Hoosier Trapper Outdoors or Hoosier Trapper Supply. You can type in either one, will pop up. We're on Facebook, Instagram. What else? Anything?
But we got the Trap House Podcast, or you do.
Well, Trap House Podcast, of course.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and how about you, Rich?
You can find us at trappinginc.com. We have a couple different Facebook pages. We have YouTube. Our YouTube, we're doing really well on it. We're over several million views now on it, and we're on Amazon Prime. Which I really like, because that actually pays pretty good. That does, just to get keep putting up all the new stuff, right? Everybody always wants your show to be an hour long, but
right.
They have no idea how many hours goes into making that half-hour show, right?
Yeah.
We're trying really hard to get away from the broadcast TV business plan. We're trying to get away from that and trying to get more into just being supported on the digital world, right? And to that end, we've launched a subscription-based service on locals.com, and we can put our stuff up. It circumvents my broadcast contracts. Otherwise, depending on how archaic a broadcast contract is, you may not be able to put anything out on YouTube or whatever for up to a year after it airs. And as I've learned, negotiating this stuff and that, I've learned that I want them to have the first right of airing, and that's good enough. And but now that we've moved into a airing on the Pursuit Channel in the United States, well, then that pushes that back again, once again, right? So by going to a subscription service, I get around all of those problems, because it's not right out there on the World Wide Web, and everybody can see it, and for free. They're paying. And the other beauty of it is that I own it. So tomorrow Instagram or YouTube or whatever could decide what we do isn't right. Have you tried to upload a YouTube recently?
Yeah.
Well, how soon is recent?
How recent?
In the last week.
No.
Okay, now you have to self-rate it. You have to decide whether you're showing violence, whether you're showing anything that they would consider to be wrong for up there, and things like what we do, skinning animals and that, they consider violent.
Oh, okay. I noticed that when we put up the skinning,
How to skin a coyote.
skinning tutorial video, it will say, that they won't monetize it, that it's not appropriate for, that's kind of as far as we've gotten. So, but
then
I don't think we've done anything recently.
I end up in other situations where now you have to declare whether it's for kids or whether kids are in it. Well, my grandkids come trapping with me. And so how do I put that on now? Because I mean, this is I mean, it's one thing for somebody in California to decide what their life is and what's proper in their life. And that this is our life here, and this
Sure.
is just normal. My
Yeah.
grandkids have been helping me skin since they've been sitting in their strollers out in the fur shed. You know, that's just
Yeah,
part of life.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
they're making those decisions now that, you know, so by going to a subscription service, we end up not worrying about that. We own it all. It can't be taken away from us, and we don't have to worry about trolls, because
Sure.
nobody's ever going to pay a nickel to go protest you. That's
Yeah.
the one thing they all are, is they're eternally cheap. So
Yeah, exactly. And that, you know, that's a very, that's definitely a point to that. While I got you on here, we were talking to Jeff Haggerty in Michigan. I don't know if you know Jeff or not.
I did one of my first podcasts with him.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So Jeff was talking about going to Alaska and trapping, and I was just kind of thinking out loud, and I had mentioned to him that my perception is that trapping is more culturally accepted there than here. But if someone from here goes to Alaska, they are more apt to accept it on that geography than they are possibly here in their lower 48 context. And I don't know if you have thought about that, or if you get that perception. Certainly in your area it would be more acceptable than here, I think. But I know it's kind of interesting to think about.
I think part of what you're talking about is just the fact that, for one thing, when you come north, you expect that, right?
Yeah.
Like the first time you come up here and we're not living in igloos, it's like, what the heck, right? So you expect it to be very different. It's like if you go to Africa or go to another country, and that's really what you're doing when you're going from Indiana to Alaska. You're going to a different country.
Sure.
And so those people have different expectations. I think if everybody, even your neighbors and everybody else, if they all behaved like they were a visitor in a strange country, we'd all get along really well.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's the problem that everybody has with that have upset me. You've offended me. That you know that I don't agree with what you're doing. I've said this a million times, but we ship on average 40,000 coyotes out of Alberta every year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the world would look like the day that trappers weren't doing that for free?
Oh my, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what that would cost? What that would cost to pay government trappers? What the depredation of payouts that would happen? That kind of stuff. Like, I mean, you have no idea. I mean, we never. I don't know of a situation where, once we moved into the regulation of trapping, that where we have endangered the resource, we're just dealing in a surplus, and we're making use of a surplus, right?
Yeah.
We're never going to run out of coyotes. We're never going to run out of muskrats. We're, those kind of things. When we did things like that, it was when we poisoned, wolves, we poisoned bears, we put that kind of stuff. We had to use those grotesque bulk techniques in order to affect the change. We couldn't do it by hunting or trapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people just don't understand that. People assume that every one of those people are, that they're a threat to the environment, and we're not. We're the last. The trappers are the last bastion between civilization and the wild. You take a look. Imagine your big cities are no different than ours. I got a buddy who all he does is trap coons in houses in Toronto. That's all he does.
Yeah.
Every now and then he gets a trap squirrel. But he probably makes more money as a trapper than any other trapper I know. But that's all he does. And most of those people, he says, every one of those people, he says, they'll have a bill from me for $500. They'll have maybe $500 or $1,000 worth of damage that's been done, and they all want to make sure that squirrel's being released somewhere. And like he says, by law, he can't. He can't take and move a problem and make it somebody else's problem. So they've brought up really strange laws where they put in, exclusion techniques. So they end up finding where the coon or the squirrel or whatever is going into the attic. They put in an exclusion door. so it can go out, but it can't go back in. He says, "I know all I'm doing." He says, "I know it. All I'm doing." He says, "I'm moving it next door." He says, "That raccoon or that squirrel is moving one house over." You know?
Got the same thing here. Got the same thing here.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, the guys who take that business seriously do quite well. With a nuisance business, but
Well, it was we we're just closer to life around here. You
yeah,
know, it's one of the stories that I've told about when I went off to the big city and I was not popular with ladies whatsoever, and I'd finally landed myself a date. I go to pick her up, and just as we're about to leave, her mom drives in, and of course, the big city of Edmonton. That time it would probably be 500,000 people. It's 1 million people now, and you have all those feral rabbits everywhere. Well, her mom runs over the feral rabbit, runs over the hind end. Well, you know what that sounds like, right? It's screaming and squealing, and I walk over to it. I don't know whether they thought I was going to make it better or whatever, but I picked it up and wrung its neck, and I tossed it sideways into alongside of the road. Well, holy, my date ended right there. I thought I was going to be arrested, and I'm trying to, for the life of me, I didn't know what was going on, because that was just a normal reaction every day. They're lucky I didn't pull the fur off of it and prep it up for supper. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of people, if you could go to Alaska, go in a situation like that on a trapline tourism or whatever, you would have a heck of a good time.
Yeah.
You would.
Yeah.
You certainly
Yeah.
would.
Sure.
Well, gentlemen, I have had a great time talking with you. It took us a long time to get this organized, but I'm sure glad we did it.
Yeah.
And
Same here. And like you said, let's do it in person if our paths cross or allow that. So yeah, that'd be awesome.
hopefully, man, because I'm just about done editing for season 6 here, and I'm getting a little bit itchy. I was we ended up in a flood here. I couldn't get out the last 8-9 days. We couldn't get out of the place because our road was flooded and culvert out and everything. But it's time to go shoot some spring beaver and have a little bit of fun. But it's been a pleasure.
Same. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
Thank
joining me.
Yeah. Thanks.
Take care.